Chapter 2207. Looking around, all she saw was an endless forest. She didn't even know where this place was. Why did the Honorable Poison Master bring her here with a teleportation scroll? She was just about to retrieve the Aurora teleportation scroll and return to Hundred Rivers City, but who knew that at this moment, a sharp pain came from her body. It was as if the blood vessels in her body were about to explode. Hiss. Ah! She cried out in pain and fell to the ground. Her hands hugged her body tightly and her face turned pale. Large beads of cold sweat seeped out of her forehead. She couldn't help but cry out in pain as she rolled on the ground. Hiss. Blood veins suddenly appeared on her pale and bloodless face. Her face gradually turned from pale to purplish black. Her lips also turned purplish black. The veins on the back of her hands also popped out and her skin turned purple. Ah, she cried out in pain. That kind of pain, as if someone was tearing her body apart, made her wish she was dead. She tried to force herself to endure it as she took out silver needles and pierced them into her acupuncture points to stop the pain. However, the silver needles didn't have any effect. Hiss. The aura of profound energy in her body spread out along with her painful cries. With a wave of her hand, the powerful aura of profound energy spread out in all directions. A bloodthirsty impulse surged in her body. At this moment, she couldn't help but want to kill someone. She wanted to vent the madness and fury in her body. However, at this moment, she faintly heard someone coming in her direction. It seems to be in front. I think I heard someone screaming. It sounds like a girl. Why would there be a girl alone in this place? No one should come to this kind of place. But that voice sounds like it's in this area. Hearing the voice gradually getting closer, Fengjiu knelt on the ground. The aura of profound energy in her body surged and a vicious aura whistled around her body. The wind blew against her red dress, causing it to make a whistling sound. Her eyes were red due to the surge of blood qi in her body. Like a wild beast, her eyes were filled with bloodlust and viciousness. There was not the slightest trace of her original coldness and wickedness. It was as if she was forcefully enduring it, forcefully suppressing her blood qi. Those blood-red eyes would occasionally return to normal. Unless there was something wrong with her aura, people would really think that they were seeing things. However, at this moment of clarity, Fengjiu gritted his teeth and flashed into her space. His entire body disappeared from the spot, leaving only some traces left behind by the surging airflow. Why is there no one here? It sounded like it came from here. A woman said in surprise. She looked around and said to the people around her, "Look, there's a cave over there." That's strange. We've been here several times, but we've never seen a cave here. Why is it here all of a sudden? The place where we came from had an array formation. That array formation protected this area, so when we came here, we couldn't see the cave here. Just now, because we followed the sound, we walked through the array formation and came here. If Fengjiu was here, she would recognize that the person who spoke was one of the 4 people she had taught before, Duan Yi. Chapter 2208. The voice just now clearly came from this area. How come the people we came to find are gone? Duan Yi said in a low voice. He looked around and released his divine sense, but he couldn't detect any aura. Maybe they left. The woman next to him said and pulled on his sleeve, "Senior brother, let's go back. Otherwise, Marshal Uncle and the others will be worried." "All right." Duan Yi responded. Just as he was about to leave with her, his gaze fell on the cave entrance not far away. "I'll go in and take a look," he said and strode into the cave. Seeing this, the woman had no choice but to follow. After walking around in a circle, he only smelled the scent of blood and a mark on the ground. Duan Yi squatted down to check and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Why did this look so much like Fengjiu's corpse dissolving water? With this thought, he couldn't help but recall the voice he heard earlier. That voice couldn't have been Fengjiu's, right? No, it shouldn't have been her. How could she have let out that kind of scream? It should have been someone else. The woman followed in and saw him squatting there with a strange expression. She couldn't help but ask, "Senior brother? Senior brother, what's wrong?" "Nothing, let's go." He stood up, his heart inexplicably heavy. He was faintly worried and planned to find a time to visit Fengjiu. The two left and walked in the direction they came from. In the space, Fengjiu was soaking in the spirit spring water. The spirit spring water was suffused with a layer of faint green light, and threads of light flowed on the surface of the water. She was soaking in it very calmly, without the madness and pain she felt outside. She relaxed and soaked in it, letting the azure lotus chi in her body surround her, purifying the poison in her body bit by bit, as well as the strange blood in her blood. The azure lotus chi surged in the spring water, and the life force visible to the naked eye enveloped her. In this space, the medicine fields grew wildly because of the azure lotus chi in her body. About the time it took for an incense stick to burn, her entire body was lifted out of the water by the aura of the green lotus. Her entire body was dripping with water. Only then did they realize that she had already fainted. The green lotus in her body seemed to have a life of its own. She lifted it out of the water and put it aside. Then, a green aura visible to the naked eye flew to a corner of the space and rummaged through the pile of treasures. Finally, the green aura rolled out a pearl the size of an egg from the pile of treasures. Now, the azure lotus chi found this bead. It came to Fengjiu's side, and with a flash of green light, the bead cracked open, revealing a green bead that was twice the size of a pill. This green bead was dark green in color, and a powerful and rich aura of spiritual power surged in the bead, releasing a rich and pure life force. The azure lotus chi drew the bead into Fengjiu's mouth and swallowed it. At this moment, the unconscious Fengjiu woke up. Chapter 2209. The dark green bead swam through her blood. Wherever it passed, her divine sense could see specks of dark green light emitting from it. The pure aura was purifying her blood. After the bead circled around her body, it came to her dantian and merged with the green lotus. She saw that when the bead merged with the green lotus seemed to have absorbed nutrients. It grew bigger and the aura surrounding the green lotus became denser. Feeling that the restlessness in her body had disappeared, she was surprised and immediately checked her pulse. She couldn't help but be startled. "The poison in my body is gone," she muttered in disbelief. She couldn't understand the reason for this. She originally had a body that was immune to poison, but the poison that the Honorable Poison Master had concocted was very strange. She didn't know what kind of ferocious beast's blood had been mixed into it, but the poison that even her body couldn't withstand had disappeared without her doing anything. Was it cured by the green lotus? Can the chaotic green lotus detoxify? She muttered in doubt. She looked around and saw the broken thing that had fallen to the side. She went forward and picked it up to take a look. Why does it look so familiar? This seems to be. She thought for a moment and a light bulb flashed in her mind. Isn't this the bead that Green Hair gave birth to? She suddenly realized. Yes, the bead that swam through her body and was finally swallowed by the green lotus. Thinking of this, she was indescribably stunned. What was going on? Green Hair was a chicken, but the egg it gave birth to was a bead. She didn't know the use of this bead, but at this time, it was inexplicably swallowed by the green lotus. It seemed to have merged with the bead and cured the poison in her body. Could it be that Green Hair had eaten something that he shouldn't have, and that's why he got this bead? She muttered in a low voice. Seeing that she was drenched in water, she immediately went to the side to change her clothes. When she felt that there was nothing wrong with her body, she flashed out of the space. When she appeared in front of the cave, she looked around. She wasn't in a hurry to go back. Instead, she used her divine sense to explore the surroundings and walked in a direction. She remembered that she had heard voices earlier. There should be people around here. Now that the Poison Master was dead, the Five Poisons sect was no longer a threat to the Heavenly Pill Building and the black market, so there was no hurry to go back. However, if she didn't go back, her brother would be anxious. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but smile. She didn't know that her brother's fighting strength was so strong. The poison in her body was detoxified, and the threat was gone. She couldn't help but feel relaxed. She walked forward briskly, and after walking for a distance, she found that there was a formation set up in this area. After easily avoiding the formation and walking for a while, she faintly heard sounds coming from the front. Thus, she restrained her aura and lightly leaped onto a tree. Her red figure gracefully flitted across the tree and quietly approached those people. When she came to a tree closer to those people, she saw that they were all wearing the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect uniform. Among them, there was one person she was familiar with. Duan Yi. Chapter 22:10. Uncle Master, I would like to head back first. Duan Yi was talking to a middle-aged man who was standing at the side. Perhaps it was the sound he had heard earlier and the bad premonition in his heart that made him a little worried. He wanted to leave early to find out more about Fengjiu. We just came out not long ago, and you want to leave first? Why are you doing this? The middle-aged man asked in confusion. He looked at Duan Yi and said, when we came out, your master specially told me to let you have a good experience. If you leave now, I won't be able to answer to your master when I return. I'm worried about a friend of mine. I heard screams inside earlier. I don't know why, but I feel a little uneasy. I want to go back and find out more about her. Duan Yi said in a low voice. If that's the case, then before the middle-aged man could finish speaking, he saw someone throw something over and hit Duan Yi's head. He was stunned and instinctively looked in the direction of the throw. When he saw the beautiful woman in red sitting on the tree, he could not help but be stunned. Who was this woman? Why was she sitting there? Actually, he was even more shocked that he had not sensed the woman sitting there at all. Fortunately, she did not have any ill intentions. Otherwise, he was afraid that Duan Yi was caught off guard when someone threw something at his head. When he lowered his head to look, he saw that it was a fruit pit. His face darkened as he looked behind him and shouted in a low voice. Who are you? Not to mention his current strength and status in the sect, even before he entered the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect, other than Fengjiu, no one had dared to throw something at his head. This person must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's guts to throw a fruit pit at him. However, when he raised his head to look behind him and his gaze landed on the red figure on the tree, he was shocked and instinctively took 2 steps back. He widened his eyes and pointed at her with a look of disbelief. You, why are you here? When Duan Yi's voice was heard, the disciples who were resting and chatting under the tree instinctively raised their heads to look. They were stunned when they saw the red figure leaning against the tree. The woman was dressed in a dazzling red dress, and her ink-black hair was only tied up with a red ribbon. The rest of her hair fell behind her back, and as the breeze blew, a strand of hair gently brushed past her beautiful face, adding a touch of laziness and charm, causing the male disciples below to be unable to close their mouths. The immortal cultivation world did not lack beauties. However, there were very few beauties who were as enchanting and seductive as the woman in front of them who had a noble and inviolable aura. The noble aura around her made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. They wanted to look away from her, but they couldn't take their eyes off her dazzling body. Little Yi, I trust you have been well since we last met. Fengjiu's eyes narrowed as the corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing a charming smile. For a moment, her originally beautiful face became even more charming under her smile, causing all the male disciples below to lose their minds and stare blankly for a moment. Duan Yi's face turned red when he heard the long-awaited teasing address. He stared at her and said angrily, I told you not to call me that. I haven't seen you for so long, but you are still so indecent. Aren't you afraid that others will laugh at you? Chapter 22:11. Duan Yi instinctively raised his hand to touch his face. His face was burning hot, and he did not even need to look to know that it was red. He could not deny it even if he wanted to. Hence, he snorted and said awkwardly, No way. I'm a little hot. The middle-aged man at the side came back to his senses and saw that all the male disciples were staring at her in a daze. He could not help but cough loudly to wake everyone up. When the female disciples saw this, some were curious, some were jealous, and some were envious. All of them looked at the woman in red. Duan Yi, who is this? The middle-aged man asked. It seemed like the two of them knew each other. Her name is Fengjiu, and she's my friend, Duan Yi said as his gaze fell on Fengjiu. He could not help but ask, aren't you coming down? Why did a girl like to sit on a tree so much? Seeing this, Fengjiu jumped down lightly from the tree and stood steadily in front of the two. She smiled at Duan Yi and nodded at the middle-aged man. Just call me Fengjiu. I happened to pass by and saw Duan Yi here, so I came over to say hello. Miss Feng. The middle-aged man nodded slightly and said, I'm the Jade True Celestial Duke of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. Although she did not look old, he knew that she was a hidden powerhouse based on the fact that he did not know that she was there earlier. He did not dare to be too casual when he spoke. Even if he was a celestial duke of a sect, he did not dare to be arrogant. Uncle Master, let me talk to her, Duan Yi said and pulled Fengjiu to the side without waiting for his Uncle Master to speak. He looked at her from head to toe and asked, I heard a scream from the other side of the cave. Was it you? Such a coincidence to pass by? He did not believe it. Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes flashed and she said with a smile, yes, it was me. Hearing this, Duan Yi could not help but ask nervously, how are you? Are you okay? Why did you scream? Why are you here alone? Didn't you say that you were at the 100 River City's Heavenly Pill Dispensary? Don't worry. I'm fine. Fengjiu patted his head and got a glare from him. He couldn't help but chuckle. It's really all right. There was just an accident. Fortunately, it's all right now. I wanted to go back, but I heard someone talking, so I came to take a look. I didn't expect it to be you. Looking at Duan Ye's red ears, she felt that it was extremely interesting. This brat was still so awkward and arrogant. He hadn't improved at all. It's good that you're fine, Duan Yi said. Then, he warned, also, don't keep patting my head. It's not good. Poochie. Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. You brat, are you afraid that it will affect you badly? Who asked you to still look like this after not seeing me for so long? There's no change at all. She shook her head. What do you mean? Look at my current cultivation level. My strength has increased by quite a bit. In any case, I am still considered a figure in the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. He seemed to be afraid that she would not approve of him, so he displayed his strength and cultivation level. All right. I know you're good. She chuckled and said, oh right, I just met Song Ming a while ago. He also told me about you guys. It seems that you guys are doing well. Chapter 22:12. Fengjiu chuckled and asked, where is this place? She had been brought here by the Honorable Poison Master and did not know where this place was. You don't know? He was stunned and looked at her with a strange expression. Then how did you get in? I was knocked unconscious and captured. She smiled and looked at his changed expression, but don't worry, I'm fine now. That person has been dealt with. Hearing this, Duan Ye's expression eased a little. He remembered the traces of the corpse dissolving water in the stone cave and said, is it the one in the stone cave? How did you get captured? There's actually someone who could make you fall for it. Fengjiu rolled her eyes and said, do you think I'm invincible? That was the sect master of the Five Venoms sect, a peak immortal venerable. How could I be his match with my current strength? It's already good that I'm not dead. If the Honorable Poison Master had taken advantage of her unconscious state to finish her off, she would probably be fine now. This is a corner of the Forest of Death that is connected to the lower reaches of the continent. This place is still considered the periphery, so the danger level is relatively low. Duan Yi looked at her and said, I originally wanted to go to your place to take a look, but seeing that you're unharmed now, I'm relieved. Fengjiu reached out to pat his head again, but seeing him take a step back defensively and stare at her, she changed her position and landed on his shoulder instead. She smiled and said, "Then don't worry and go train. I'll go back first. When you've made an appointment, come to the Heavenly Pill building in 100 Rivers City to find me. At that time, I'll treat you to a good meal and we'll have a good chat." Hearing this, Duan Ye's expression darkened. He looked at her and nodded, "All right. Take care of yourself." Then I'll go first." She turned and walked back to where the Jade True Immortal Lord was and said, "Immortal Lord, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Duan Yi." "Don't worry, Miss Feng." The Jade True Immortal Lord nodded. He looked at the beautiful woman in red in front of him and felt strange. Why did the name Fengjiu sound so familiar? However, he had never seen her before, but he seemed to have heard this name somewhere before. "Duan Yi, take care." Fengjiu waved her hand and then turned and left. Seeing her leave, Duan Yi did not move. However, when he saw her figure gradually getting further away, he frowned and walked to the Jade True Immortal Lord. "Martial uncle, please tell my master that I'm going out to train. I'll go with her first. Please tell my master that I go out training." Hearing this, True Jade Immortal Monarch was stunned and hurriedly pulled him back. "You want to go with her? When are you?" "Ling. No. If my master asks, just say that I left with Fengjiu. If he wants to find me, then go to the Heavenly Pill building in the 100 Rivers City." Duan Yi said, and immediately rushed in the direction of Fengjiu. At the same time, he shouted, "Fengjiu! Wait for me." What training? Nothing could compare to being by her side. Chapter 22:13. After walking for a while, Fengjiu heard the voice behind her and couldn't help but be startled. She stopped and turned around to see Duan Yi following her. She looked at him in surprise and raised her eyebrows slightly as she asked, "Why are you following me?" Duan Yi quickly walked to her side and said, "Training is boring. I'll go with you and take a look at your Heavenly Pill house in 100 Rivers City." Hearing this, she looked behind him and asked, "Your martial uncle agreed? Is it okay to follow me like this? What problem could there be? Let's go." As he spoke, he strode forward. Looking at Duan Yi walking in front of her, she shook her head and smiled. Originally, she wanted to use the Aurora transfer scroll to leave when they reached a place a little further ahead. Who would have thought that this brat would follow her? Since that was the case, the Aurora transfer scroll would not be used for the rest of the journey. Although the Aurora transfer scroll was a treasure and could teleport people away from their destination in an instant, it could only be used by the owner and could not be used to bring people away. "Fengjiu, is Song Ming still in the Immortal Sect? What is his current level of strength?" Duan Yi asked. Their strengths were about the same and they were not cultivating in the same sect. The last time they had contacted each other, they had only talked about the general situation and did not ask in detail. How was Song Ming's strength after not seeing him for so long? Fengjiu glanced at him and then smiled, "About the same as you." "What about you? What is your current level of strength? Why don't I see any spiritual energy on your body? Are you hiding it again?" Duan Ye's eyes scanned her body, wondering why he could not see her cultivation level. "Didn't I get into an accident? My spiritual energy has been sealed and I can't use it." She smiled and her gaze fell on the front. "Your spiritual energy has been sealed? Is it that poison master?" Duan Yi was shocked and stopped to pull her. "I can help you undo it. With his strength, he should be able to undo the sealed spiritual energy." Unexpectedly, Fengjiu shook her head. "You won't be able to undo it. That venerable poison is at the immortal venerable realm. I'm thinking of asking Imo Chen to help me undo it. His cultivation base is enough." Hearing this, Duan Yi frowned and looked at her. "You're too reckless. Don't you know that you have many enemies? You didn't even tell me that you couldn't use your spiritual energy and aura. Tell me, what if you encounter danger on the way back?" Fortunately, I came with you. Otherwise, I really don't know how you would have saved yourself if you had encountered any danger along the way. Speaking up to here, he suddenly thought of something and was stunned for a moment. That's not right. I remember that you have a profound spiritual body, so you can't use your spiritual energy, but your profound energy shouldn't be sealed, right? Fengjiu smiled and nodded. Amen, I don't have any profound energy. Otherwise, how would I have been able to kill that honorable poison master? She smiled and tucked a strand of hair that had been blown by the wind behind her ear. What level is your profound strength at? Duanyi asked. He couldn't see anything from it. My profound strength has only reached the martial god realm. She looked at the sky and said, I don't know how long it will take to get out of this place. Why don't we travel by flying equipment? As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and threw out the feather at her waist. The rainbow glass feather expanded in front of her until it was big enough for her to sit on. Chapter 22:14. When Duanyi saw this, he immediately rode on his sword to catch up. However, the speed of the imperial sword flight was pulled apart. He had already used his fastest speed to catch up, but there was still a long distance between them. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Fengjiu was Fengjiu after all. Even if her spiritual energy was sealed and she could only use her profound energy now, he might not be able to catch up to her speed even if he wanted to. In the evening, the sun gradually set in the west, and the rosy clouds dyed half the sky red. Night was about to arrive. Fengjiu, look, there seems to be a house there. Why don't we stay there tonight? Duanyi pointed to a courtyard not far away and said. Fengjiu sat on the rainbow glass feather and looked ahead. She saw that there were no villages or shops in this area. There was only a courtyard by a small stream downhill in front of them. Moreover, that courtyard was connected to 3 other courtyards. It wasn't the house of an ordinary commoner. She couldn't help but feel strange. There aren't any houses in this area. There's only one courtyard there, and that courtyard looks a little strange. She voiced out her doubts. With our strength, why should we be afraid of anything strange? Duanye's words were full of confidence. Even if it's a place that specializes in killing and plundering, there's no need to be afraid of him. Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile. She glanced at him and smiled. Since you've said so, then let's go. She lightly jumped down from the feather. She stretched out her hand and put the rainbow glass feather back on her waist. Seeing this, Duanyi also put away his flying sword and changed to walking. He followed her to the courtyard downhill, sizing it up as he walked. This courtyard looked like a mud courtyard, but the connected structure didn't look like a common farmer's courtyard. It was no wonder that Fengjiu said that this place was a little strange. When the two arrived at the courtyard, Fengjiu glanced at Duanyi and signaled him to knock on the door. Seeing this, Duanyi went forward and knocked on the door. Is anyone there? We're here to stay the night. Not long after, the two of them heard footsteps coming from inside. Then, the courtyard door creaked open, and a beautiful woman of about 35 years old with a voluptuous figure appeared at the courtyard door. When the beautiful woman opened the door and saw the two people outside, a strange look flashed across her eyes. Her gaze swept over Fengjiu's outstanding appearance, then swept over Duanyi, and then revealed a smile. Are the two of you passing by? Do you want to stay at my house? Neither Fengjiu nor Duanyi had expected that such a beautiful woman would live in such a remote place. Moreover, the other party did not hide her spiritual aura. After opening the door, she stared at the two of them and sized them up. Madam, we are just passing by. I wonder if it would be convenient for you to stay the night? Fengjiu asked, meeting the gaze of the beautiful woman. Of course, the two of you, please come in. She smiled and opened the door to let the two of them in. After they entered, she closed the door and led them inside. She said, there are usually some cultivators passing by here who come to stay the night. My house doesn't have anything else but a lot of empty rooms. Please come with me and have a seat inside. Mother, do we have guests? A delicate woman's voice sounded. Duan Yi and Fengjiu stopped and looked towards the voice. Chapter 22:15. Fengjiu's eyes flickered as she stared at the three young women with different graces with great interest. The three of them looked to be between the ages of 15 and 18 or 19. One of them was dainty and pretty, the one in the middle was enchanting and flirtatious, while the last one was beautiful with a hint of arrogance. Three women, three different types of beauty. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at them and a faint smile appeared on the corners of her lips. Just as Fengjiu was sizing up the three women were sizing her up as well. The three of them were also beauties, but when they saw the woman in red robes before them, they could not help but secretly praise her. What a peerless beauty of peerless grace. The simple red robes on her body exuded an aura of incomparable splendor. Her half-squinted eyes, slightly curled lips, and faint smile carried a trace of languor and charm. As women, they could not help but be stunned by her beauty. A beauty like this was a true beauty. She only needed to stand there quietly and she was already as beautiful as a painting. One could not take their eyes off her. Duan Yi couldn't help but frown when he saw that the three women who suddenly appeared were so outstanding. This place was indeed strange. It would be one thing if such a family existed in the city, but it was not normal for such a place to have such beautiful women. Especially since the way the three of them were looking at Fengjiu made him feel uncomfortable. However, when he looked at Fengjiu, he saw that her expression was the same as usual. There was no change in her expression at all. Cough. He cleared his throat and looked at the beautiful woman, asking, "Madam, may I ask if you could lead us to our rooms to rest?" "Of course. Please follow me, both of you." The beautiful woman then turned to the three women and said, "Prepare some food and wine. Serve these two guests later." "Yes, mother." The three of them bent their knees and bowed. Their beautiful eyes fell upon Duan Yi with smiles. The two of them followed the beautiful woman inside. However, she did not arrange for them to stay in the same courtyard. Instead, she arranged for them to stay in separate courtyards. "Young lady, you will rest in this room tonight. As for this sir, please follow me to the courtyard next door to rest." Hearing this, Duan Yi frowned and asked, "Are there no empty rooms in this courtyard?" "If there are, I'll stay here." Fengjiu smiled and glanced at Duan Yi, saying, "The guest will follow the host's wishes. We'll stay as the madam says. We're only separated by one courtyard." When the beautiful woman heard this, she smiled and said to the two of them, "I'm really sorry, there's only one empty room left. The other rooms are filled with my girls' things." Duan Yi could only give up when he saw this, and he said to Fengjiu, "Then you rest first. I'll come over later." As he spoke, he followed the beautiful woman to the room next door. "Sir, you'll stay here tonight. You're..." Duan Ye's eyes looked at Duan Ye's eyes was, "Madam," Duan Yi said, then turned and left. After the woman left, Duan Yi looked around the room and knocked on the door of Fengjiu's room. "Come in." Fengjiu was sitting in front of the dressing table, combing his hair. Seeing Duan Yi enter, he put down the comb and turned to look at him, asking with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Chapter 22:16. Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile. "Of course it's the beauties. Do you even need to ask? Look at the three of them, they each have their own beauty. There's one who's delicate and charming, one who's coquettish and coquettish, one who's cold and elegant. Also, that madam has a voluptuous figure and an outstanding face. She has a different kind of charm, but why do I feel like they're missing a pure and innocent one? Say, don't tell me there's another one." Hearing this, Duan Ye's face darkened, and he said in annoyance, "Can you be more serious? I'm talking about serious matters with you. This woman, why is she so unreliable? Can't she see that I'm worried? I'm very serious." She chuckled, "Aren't we already here, and nothing has happened, so what are you so nervous about? Besides, they're all women. Even if they're at a disadvantage, it's the women who are at a disadvantage. What are you worried about? But. He opened his mouth, and finally, like a deflated balloon, he said, "Forget it, I don't care anymore." The two of them sat in the room for a while and chatted until the sky darkened, and a woman's voice came from outside the room. "The two of you, my mother invites the two of you to the front courtyard for a meal." The person who called them was the delicate and pretty woman. In the room, Fengjiu heard this and couldn't help but smile. He stood up and said to Duan Yi, "Let's go. With a beauty by your side, what else do you have to be dissatisfied with?" With that, he smiled and walked out. "The two of you, please follow me." The woman's pretty face turned slightly, and she lowered her eyes with a smile. She held a lamp in her hand, and turned around to lead the way. The sky was dark, and the moon had not yet risen. There were no lights on the small path in the courtyard, so the lamp in the woman's hand became a guiding light. Fengjiu and Duan Yi followed behind her at a moderate pace, and came to the front courtyard. They saw a large table in the front courtyard, and on the table were more than 10 exquisite dishes and 2 jugs of fine wine. 3 beautiful women were busy there, and some were setting up wine cups, and some were preparing bowls and chopsticks. Seeing the additional person, a pure and innocent woman in a white dress, Fengjiu couldn't help but smile, and glanced at Duan Yi beside him. That glance seemed to say, "See. Am I right? There really is a pure and innocent woman. The two of you are here? Please take a seat." The madam walked out from the back and gestured for the two to take a seat. Fengjiu and Duan Yi walked forward and said to the madam with a smile, "Sorry to disturb you. I didn't expect that the host would entertain us so warmly. It's fate that we met. Quick, sit down." After she sat down, she gestured for the other two to sit down as well. Then, she smiled and said, "Let me introduce you two. These are my 4 daughters, Yu Jiao, Yu Rong, Yu Hua, and Yu Xiang. You two have already met the first 3, but this is the youngest." She patted the hand of the woman in white beside her and said with a smile. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, "Madam is so lucky. These young ladies are all so beautiful that they are like fairies." Hearing this, the madam chuckled. "At most, they can be considered passable. How can they compare to Miss Celestial Beauty?" As she spoke, she looked at Fengjiu and asked, "I still don't know how to address Miss Fengjiu," she said with a smile, and didn't hide her name. She looked at Duan Yi and said, "This is Duan Yi, my friend." Chapter 22:17. With that said, she smiled and continued, "Of course, other than some cultivators who passed through here and went to train in the forest of death, ordinary people aren't often seen. However, it's even rarer to see 2 young people with outstanding looks like you two. We came out from the forest of death." Duan Yi continued, and his gaze landed on the madam. He was implying that they came out from that place and were capable people, so it was best for her not to try anything funny. Hearing this, the beautiful madam revealed a look of surprise and admiration. "I didn't expect the two of you to dare to train in the forest of death at such a young age. It's truly admirable." As she spoke, she said to her daughters, "Hurry and pour wine for the 2 of them." "Yes." The 4 women surrounded Fengjiu and Lang Hua and poured wine for the 2 of them. They then sat down beside them and occasionally looked at the 2 of them. Fengjiu's expression was magnanimous as she allowed them to look at her without any change in her expression. Smelling the faint fragrance of the cosmetics, the corner of her lips curled up and she revealed a smile. She raised her wine cup and took a sip of the wine. As the wine entered her mouth, the rich and mellow wine fragrance spread in her mouth. She couldn't help but praise, "Good wine." Duan Yi was originally a little worried that these women would put drugs in the wine, but seeing that Fengjiu had drunk it, he was relieved. He picked up the wine cup and took a sip. The mellow taste of the wine was indeed not bad, so he also let go of his worries and drank. "Come, eat. These are all the dishes my daughters cooked," the beautiful madam said with a smile and picked up some food to eat. She also asked Fengjiu and the others to eat. Duan Yi instinctively looked at Fengjiu. Seeing her pick up her chopsticks and eat, he also started to eat. The women sitting beside them curiously asked where they were from. Where were they going? While pouring wine for the two of them, they were full of laughter and the atmosphere was very relaxed and cheerful. The night gradually darkened, and the few of them drank quite a bit of wine. When the women were about to pour more wine, Fengjiu stood up and waved her hand. No, I can't drink anymore. I have to go back and rest. At this moment, her face was slightly red and her eyes were a bit drunk. A seductive aura naturally emitted from her body, causing the beautiful madam's eyes to light up. Especially when she saw that Fengjiu's beautiful face was a little drunk, and her every movement was seductive. As her eyes moved, a seductive aura overflowed from her eyes, causing her to become quite excited. All right, then go back and have a good sleep. I'll have them send you back. The beautiful madam said. She gave her 4 women a look. Thus, the 4 men each helped the 2 of them to their rooms. After 2 of them sent Feng Nine back, they saw her fall asleep immediately. The 2 women looked at each other and nudged her gently. Miss Feng? Miss Feng? Seeing that there was no response, he smiled. I thought she would be difficult to deal with. But it turns out she's only like this. The delicate woman said with a smile. The woman in white next to her said, no matter how high a cultivator's cultivation is, they would be drunk to the point of unconsciousness after drinking the immortal intoxication, not to mention she drank so much. All right, she can't run away anyway. Let's go over there and take a look. The delicate woman said and pulled the woman in white outside. Chapter 22:18. His entire body was boiling hot, as if his blood was boiling. However, he could not muster any strength in his body. He had drunk a lot of wine and was a little drunk, but at this moment, his consciousness was gradually waking up because of his burning body. He squinted his eyes and tried to open them. In his hazy state, he saw 2 women working together to lift him up and put him on a stone bed. His burning body touched the cold stone surface, and it was very comfortable. However, in the next moment, his 4 limbs were tied up, and he was lying on the bed with his arms and legs spread out, unable to move. He was shocked and opened his mouth. What are you doing? He was about to shout, but when his voice came out, it was clear that he was powerless. On the other side, Fengjiu, who was sleeping, opened her eyes after the 2 women left. She turned around and jumped up, walking out. After leaving her room, when she passed by another room in the courtyard, her eyes moved slightly, and she looked at the locked door. She walked forward softly, took out something and fiddled with the lock. Not long after, the lock opened with a click. She gently pushed the door open and walked in, then gently closed the door. When she walked in, she smelled a faint smell of wine and medicinal herbs. She was slightly surprised. Could it be that medicinal wine was hidden here? With a flip of her hand, she took out a luminous pearl and shone it in front of her. When she looked, she felt a wave of nausea surge out from her stomach, and she almost vomited. There were many transparent wine jars that were used to soak medicinal wine. The wine in the jars was good, but there were also some internal organs of beasts soaking in the wine. At first glance, it was really disgusting. She glanced around and saw that one of the jars was filled with the eyeballs of beasts. Some of them were intestines, while others were claws and tendons. When she saw the latter part, her heart skipped a beat. The ones at the latter part were actually human. Her expression changed slightly. She put away the luminous pearl and quickly turned to leave, heading to the courtyard next door. When she entered the courtyard, she heard the voices of the madam and her so-called daughters talking. Be careful later. He is a cultivator of the fairy realm. His inner core is good stuff. Master, the medicinal wine is ready. We can start at any time. Master, what should we do with the woman in red? She's still sleeping over there. Another person asked. That woman's appearance is so outstanding. Naturally, she should be taken good care of. When I'm done here, I'll use the soul assimilation technique on her to make her forget the past. In the future, she'll be your sister. Hearing the laughter inside, Fengjiu's heart was filled with anger. She stepped forward and kicked the door open. With a loud bang, the door shattered. Who is it? The people in the room were shocked and shouted. When they turned around, they couldn't help but be startled. They were all astonished. It's you. Wasn't she unconscious after drinking the drunken immortal? Why was he here? When the beautiful woman saw that the person who came was Fengjiu, her beautiful eyes flashed, and she looked at her with some surprise. You're not drunk? There was actually someone who drank the immortal drunken wine and didn't get drunk? She couldn't help but size up the beautiful woman in red again. Seeing the cold glint in her eyes, her entire body filled with biting cold killing intent, and her profound aura surging, she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "You're a mystic." Chapter 22:19. Fengjiu's clear and cold gaze swept past her before landing on Duan Ye's body, which was tied up on the stone bed in the room. When she saw that he was completely unharmed, she finally relaxed. I can't be bothered to deal with beasts, but I can't stand to watch as you lay your hands on humans. Especially since you've dared to lay your hands on my people. As she spoke, she pulled out a dagger and twirled it around in her hand. The dagger's gleaming sharpness was particularly horrifying in the night. Just as their gazes fell upon the dagger in her hand, they saw a flash of red robes before their eyes. The woman's body flashed forward and the gleaming dagger stabbed towards the beautiful woman in front of her. Interesting. The beautiful woman flashed a demonic smile. When she saw Fengjiu's dagger coming towards her, she immediately stepped forward and raised her long sword to meet the attack. Clang! The dagger and sword clashed against each other, producing a clanging sound. The auras from both of their bodies surged outwards and the powerful air currents caused the atmosphere to become oppressive. The women's powers were not very high. Under the pressure from both of their auras, their faces turned pale and cold sweat broke out from their bodies. When Duan Yi, who was lying on the stone bed, saw Fengjiu's arrival, he heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed completely. It was a good thing that he had thought that she had fallen for the trick. Now, it seems that he was the only one who had fallen for the trick. However, with her around, he should be fine. However, why does my body feel as if it's on fire? It doesn't feel like I've been drugged with an aphrodisiac. Instead, it feels like there's a fire burning in my blood, causing my inner core to heat up as well. Inner core? That's right. These people had wanted to dig out my inner core. They had even said that they had prepared some strong wine and were waiting for my inner core to be soaked in. What are they trying to do? What's the point of digging out my inner core? While he was deep in thought, Fengjiu's dagger flew towards the beautiful woman with a sharp blade aura. The beautiful woman suddenly dodged to the side and dodged the fatal dagger which was flying towards her heart. However, just as she was about to turn around, a pair of hands had silently grabbed her throat. Don't move. Fengjiu stood behind the beautiful woman, one hand twisting her hand behind her back, the other hand grabbing her throat and lifting her chin slightly, making her stand on her tiptoes. I don't know how to show mercy to women. It wouldn't be good if I didn't control my strength well enough to break your neck. His gentle voice was cold, and the chilling killing intent in his words caused the beautiful woman's body to stiffen. At this moment, her beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. It was as if she couldn't believe that she, a spiritual cultivator at the fairy realm, would actually lose to a Xian cultivator. Furthermore, it was at the hands of a girl of such a young age. Master! Master! When the four women saw this scene, they cried out in alarm. However, when they saw their master being captured, they did not dare to step forward. Some of them had already quietly moved away and were about to escape. However, at this moment, Fengjiu waved his hand and 3 silver needles shot out. Swish! Swish! Ah! The cold and elegant woman was hit by the silver needles and fell from the sky, crying out in pain. When she saw her master's cold gaze, she couldn't help but shrink back and lower her head with a pale face. Chapter 22:20. She didn't feel that she had done anything wrong, but she didn't dare to meet her master's icy cold gaze. She had seen her vicious and inhumane methods, and rather than saying that she respected her, it would be more accurate to say that she feared her even more. Fengjiu glanced at them and said, "I didn't ask you to leave, so none of you can leave." Saying that, she used her profound energy to lock that beautiful woman's shoulder blade, causing her to fall onto the ground without any strength in her body before she walked forward. When those few women saw her walking forward, their hearts trembled and they couldn't help but retreat backwards. One of them suddenly thought of something and quickly walked over to Duan Ye's side, picked up a small knife by the side and pressed it against Duan Ye's throat as she shouted sternly at Fengjiu, "Stop right there. You're not allowed to come over." Fengjiu's brows rose as a devilish smile hung on his lips as he stared at her. His gaze swept past her fearless face and landed on the hand which was holding onto the small knife. She saw that the small knife which was pressed against Duan Ye's throat was lowered slightly as it cut his skin, causing a trace of blood to seep out. That bright red blood was extremely glaring to her eyes. "Be careful, don't hurt my men." She spoke in a neither hurried nor slow manner as her gaze stared at the small knife in her hand and a cold glint flashed past the depths of her eyes. Not knowing if it was because she was frightened by Fengjiu's gaze or what, that woman's hand which was holding onto the small knife against Duan Ye's throat couldn't help but move away a little as she shouted at Fengjiu at the same time, "Let go of my master. Otherwise, I'll kill him." Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile, "All right." She responded, and just as she turned around, her clear eyes swept towards her and saw that she heaved a sigh of relief. Her footsteps shifted slightly and the hand which was pressed against Duan Ye's throat also moved away a little. Just at this moment, she turned around and the 3 silver needles in her hand shot out with a whoosh. Amen. With a muffled groan, the woman's eyes widened in shock. 2 silver needles had pierced between her eyebrows, while the last one had pierced her throat. 3 needles had been fired at the same time, killing her in one blow. "I hate being threatened the most. Since you dare to threaten me, you should be prepared to die." She strode forward step by step, her red dress fluttering with her every step. The other 2 people retreated in horror, not daring to approach her. Bang! The woman fell straight to the ground. Even when she died, she did not manage to catch her breath, nor did she manage to close her eyes. Fengjiu only glanced indifferently at the 2 women who had retreated, then walked forward to untie the rope that bound Duan Ye. He stretched out his hand and saw that Duan Ye's body was heating up, and the blood in his body was boiling as if his blood vessels were about to explode. Thus, he took out a pill and fed it to Duan Ye. "Circulate your qi and walk around your body. You should be fine after sweating it out," she said to Duan Ye. Then, she said to the 2 women at the side, "Bring a chair over." As she spoke, she walked out of the courtyard. The 2 women trembled and looked at each other. The woman in white then brought a chair over and placed it in the courtyard. She did not dare to run away and retreated to the side. "Speak. How long have you been doing this for? What are you planning to do with those things?" She sat lazily on the chair and stared at the beautiful woman whose shoulder blades had been locked by her. She then looked at the 2 people who were curled up in a corner and the man who was sprawled on the ground. Chapter 22:21. The beautiful woman lying on the ground was deathly pale, and beads of cold sweat were forming on her forehead. She was in so much pain that she couldn't even speak. When she heard Fengjiu's words, she glared at her with a pair of eyes that seemed to emit fire. If she could speak now, she would definitely ask angrily, "Who are you? What are you doing?" She had been doing things for so long and had encountered countless cultivators. Even those who were stronger than her, and she didn't dare to touch them, she didn't notice anything unusual about her. However, this woman was an anomaly. So what if she discovered her? But she still fell into her hands. No matter how she thought about it, she couldn't accept it. "Speak. Fengjiu coldly shouted. His languid expression turned severe as he swept a glance at the women. A wave of profound energy pressure also enveloped the three of them. The woman who was shot by Fengjiu's silver needle had already sat up, but when the pressure came, she only felt a wave of pressure, as if a huge rock was pressing down on her body, causing her to be unable to breathe. The blood in her body surged, and she immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The other two women knelt down under the pressure. They didn't intend to speak at first, but now they hurriedly begged for mercy. We'll speak, we'll speak. Fengjiu withdrew his pressure and glanced at the two of them. Speak. The two women didn't dare to look at the beautiful woman. Instead, they lowered their heads and said, Master is good at brewing medicinal wine. She often takes some beasts to soak in the medicinal wine. After adding medicinal herbs, it has the effect of increasing one's strength. Master sold these things to a one-eyed devil cultivator. Later, under the devil cultivator's request, Master started to use us as bait to lure some cultivators into the academy. After they drank the immortal drunken wine, she took their inner cores. At this point, the woman in white's voice became softer and softer. Master said that a cultivator's inner core can be used as medicine. If the spiritual energy in the inner core is absorbed, it can increase one's cultivation. Especially for some cultivators who have reached the nascent soul stage, their inner cores contain nascent souls. It's a rare treasure, so. Hearing this, Fengjiu's brows slightly furrowed. Beasts' inner cores were treasures, but cultivators' inner cores were even more so. Many people cultivated for tens or even hundreds of years before they could condense their inner cores. They killed people to take their inner cores in such a vicious and bloody way. Even if she didn't meet such a person today, she would meet other people who wanted to take their lives. At this moment, Duan Yi, who was sweating profusely after adjusting his qi, walked over and stared at those people with a cold expression. Suddenly, his hand swept past his waist, and a cold light flashed past his sword. Those three people were already dead. Seeing this, Fengjiu was slightly surprised. You killed them all? This brat was too impatient. He didn't even say a word before he killed them all. His. Duan Yi looked at her. What? This person can't be killed like this. I still have a use for him. Fengjiu said with a smile. He walked forward and looked at the beautiful woman. You know the soul-absorbing technique? Chapter 22. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled indifferently. It's all right, I didn't want you to tell me anyway. As soon as her voice fell, she revealed a strange smile. Because, I have plenty of ways to find out. As she spoke, she raised her hand and reached towards the woman's head. Seeing this, the beautiful woman's pupils shrank and she wanted to retreat in shock. You want a soul search? Soul searching was a method to find out everything about the other party. However, the person who was soul searched would suffer from dementia in the lightest case and death in the worst case. It could be said that after soul searching, the person would be crippled. Fengjiu curled her lips into a smile and ignored her struggle and fear. She reached out her hand and pressed it. At the same time, as she adjusted her profound energy aura, a trace of divine sense also entered her mind. Duan Yi stood at the side and watched. He watched as she stood there quietly with her eyes closed. He watched as the beautiful woman stood there in a daze and did not move at all. After a long time, he saw Fengjiu retract her hand. At this time, the beautiful woman was already lying on the ground. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, she also stopped breathing. Fengjiu closed her eyes and digested everything in her mind. After a long time, she opened her eyes and said, I saw the one-eyed devil cultivator who dealt with them in her memories. That was one of the 10 devils, the one-eyed mad demon. She looked at him and said, the 10 great devil cultivators under the demon sovereign are not easy to deal with. Now that my spiritual energy is sealed and there's no way to know the time in this woman's mind, these few days will be the time we agreed to meet with the one-eyed mad demon. Let's deal with this place and leave as soon as possible. All right. Duan nodded and looked around. It's most convenient to burn this place down. Thus, the two of them used strong wine to light the fire and set the place on fire. The fire burned along with the strong wine, and the medicinal wine in the medicine bottles also exploded along with the heat of the fire. With a rumble, the fire rushed into the sky and almost lit up half of the sky. They watched from afar. The place happened to be at the bottom of the hill, so the fire did not spread. It was only when the courtyard was burned down and the fire gradually died down that they left on the flying vehicle. The sun in the sky quietly rose and the first rays of sunlight scattered on the ground. Dawn had arrived quietly. Duan Yi sat on the flying vehicle and looked at Feng Jiu, who was lying next to him sleeping with her eyes closed. He frowned and asked, "Immortal drunken immortal wine, why aren't you drunk?" Feng Jiu, who was resting with her eyes closed, smiled when she heard this. She didn't even open her eyes and said leisurely, "How can that be the same? Don't know who I am?" Hearing this, the corner of Duan Ye's mouth twitched. "You're Feng Jiu, you're amazing." He was puzzled. Since that wine was indeed drunken immortal, why wasn't she drunk? "So you to be more careful next time, you may not be able to eat the things that I can eat." As she spoke, she opened her eyes and sat up. She smiled and said, "Tell me, what did you learn in that sect? Why don't I learn to improve you to me?" Duan, Feng Jiu of, Feng Yi, of T, Fa of course. Frowning, Fa's well, he, to her, to him to the end, he, to, of course, he, to, of to, and was, to him, the. Chapter 22-23. The two of them sat on the flying device until they reached a town. Then, they disembarked and walked towards the city gate. Seeing many people lined up in front of them, Duan Yi looked at Feng Jiu. "We didn't have a good rest last night. Let's rest here for the night. They'll take care of the heavenly pill building, so you don't have to worry too much." Feng Jiu smiled. "That's good too. Anyway, there's nothing much to do now. I'm just afraid that my brother and Mo Chen will be worried about me." As she spoke, she looked towards the city and said, "Later, let's enter the city and see if there's a branch of the Tianyuan Palace. If there is, let them send a message back so that they won't be worried at home. Then let's also send a message to Song Ming and the others. Tell them that I've left the sect to follow you." He looked at her and said, "That's fine too." She nodded. The two of them walked forward together and followed the people lining up to the city gate. Looking at the city gate guards who seemed to be searching for something, her eyes moved slightly. She said, "Those people seem to be looking for something." It was normal for there to be guards at the city gate. However, searching people's bodies like this was a little too much, especially when there were some women among them. It was really outrageous to let one or two male guards search their bodies. Duan Yi looked to the front and saw that some of the women from ordinary families had heard that they would be searched after entering the city gate, so they all retreated back. Some of the female cultivators walked forward, but the guards did not dare to be too presumptuous, and only roughly sized them up before letting them go. "I'm really not hiding anything on me. I'm just carrying my sister. We're entering the city to find a doctor. My family lives in a small mountain village not far from the city. Really, I'm just an ordinary woman." A plainly dressed woman was carrying a 7 or 8-year-old girl wrapped in a sheet. When she saw the guard's outstretched hand, she could not help but retreat as she explained. What kind of woman would be willing to be searched by a man like this? Even if she was not a cultivator and was just an ordinary person, she would not be willing to be taken advantage of like this. Who knows if you're telling the truth? It's not peaceful in the city these days. Everyone has to be checked carefully. It's the same for men and women. A city guard said and pushed the woman arrogantly. "It's fine if you don't want to be checked. Hurry up and move aside. Don't block the path of the people behind you." There were almost no young women in the queue. However, when some of the older women came forward, those people simply looked at them and waved their hands to let them pass. Obviously, they had no interest in the older women. I hear that a good number of people have died in the city recently. That is why the city is under martial law. Everyone who goes in and out is checked. However, the actions of these people are too obvious. They dare not offend the female cultivators and have no interest in touching the older women. That's right. There was a teenage girl from our village who wanted to enter the city to buy medicine for her father. She was stopped by these people and taken advantage of quite a bit. When she went back, her eyes were swollen from crying. These days, some young girls won't enter the city for no reason. Even if they have something to do, they will ask others to do it for them. Cultivators don't dare to provoke them, so they can only let us ordinary people suffer. The two old men and the man standing in front of Fengjiu and Duanyi whispered. Their gazes swept past the crowd in front of them and landed on the woman carrying the girl on her back. They then glanced at the city guards. Chapter 22-24. That's right. Look, most of the people entering the city are men. That woman in front of us is the only outsider in our Huang village, and she only has a grandmother and a younger sister. Her younger sister fell into a stream yesterday, and although we managed to save her, she's still unconscious. We carried her sister into the city early in the morning to find a doctor, but who would have thought that we would encounter such an incident? They don't even have a man in their family. When they encounter such a thing, they can only suffer in silence. What else can they do? Us commoners can't afford to offend people like them. Upon hearing the whispers of the people in front of her, Fengjiu shot a glance at Duanyi beside her, and said, "Aren't you going to help them?" Duanyi glanced at her, and said, "I've never liked to meddle in other people's business." As soon as his voice fell, he asked in a knowing tone, "You want to meddle in other people's business?" Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle upon hearing this, and she reached out to pinch his naturally babyish cheeks, and said, "Little Yi Yi, look at your tone. You're making it sound like I'm meddling in other people's business. But then again, you're right, I do like to meddle in other people's business. Why are you pinching my cheeks again?" Duanyi glared at her in embarrassment and anger. It was one thing in the past, but why did she still like to pinch his cheeks when he wasn't paying attention? Did he look so easy to bully with that baby face of his? Sigh, I'm just itching for a fight. She chuckled and strode forward. Dressed in red, her features were devastatingly beautiful, and her bearing was peerlessly noble. All of the people lining up to enter the city, regardless of whether they were commoners or cultivators, involuntarily took a step back and opened up a path for her. Seeing this, Duanyi had no choice but to follow her. He hated it when people called him babyish, and he hated it when people touched his face. However, Fengjiu was an exception. To him, she wasn't family, but she was more important than family, so he naturally couldn't get angry with her. However, he was a man, after all, and he was constantly being teased like this by her, so he felt rather uncomfortable. Up ahead, the woman was humbly begging the city guard to let her into the city. At this moment, Fengjiu had already made her way to the front, and her appearance caused the city guard to stare at her in a daze. Fairy, are you also going into the city?" A city guard captain squeezed his way over to Fengjiu, and asked as he looked at her with amazement and flattery. Such a beautiful woman with such an extraordinary temperament was definitely not an ordinary person. She might be a fairy from a noble family or a sect. City guards like them naturally did not dare to offend her. Fengjiu stopped, glanced at the woman, and said to the city guard captain, "This woman is carrying a child and has been here for a long time. She's just an ordinary person, why don't you let her in?" Yes. Since Fairy has spoken, this lowly one does not dare to disobey." The city guard captain hurriedly responded and said to the woman beside him, "Quickly go in." Seeing this, the woman with the child on her back gratefully said to Fengjiu, "Thank you, Fairy." "Thank you, Fairy." Then she quickly carried her sister into the city. When she saw the woman enter the city, Fengjiu glanced at the captain of the city guards and said, "It's the first time I've seen such city guards. Could it be that your city governor allowed you to seize the opportunity to take advantage of the city?" Hearing this, the city guard captain's face paled, and he cried out in his heart, "Oh no!" Chapter 22-25. Fairy, fairy, please calm down. Actually, we're just doing this for the safety of the city. The city guard captain quickly said, "Fairy, there's something you don't know. These days, people have been killed in the city, and it's not just one or two. That's why we've increased our vigilance and investigation. If there's anything we can't do, we'll definitely change." Fengjiu was too lazy to talk to them. He only said, "It's best if you remember what you said. Watch your subordinates. If this kind of thing happens again, don't blame me for going to your city lord." "Yes, yes, yes. We won't dare, we won't dare." The city guard captain replied while wiping his sweat. He bowed and smiled as he sent them into the city. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. "Captain, she's just a young lady. Why are you afraid of her?" a city guard asked in a small voice. He didn't understand. That woman's temperament was a bit more outstanding. Her appearance was more beautiful than the other beauties. She was such a delicate beauty, but she didn't have any spiritual energy. He really didn't know why the captain was so scared. Hearing this, the city guard captain fiercely kicked the city guard. "What do you know?" He glared at the city guard and scolded, "Hurry up and watch over the people entering the city. Don't take advantage of other people's women. Otherwise, I'll skin you alive." Hearing this, the city guards' faces paled. They quickly replied, "Yes, yes." Only then did they return to their posts. However, this time, they were a lot more obedient and didn't dare to act recklessly. When the cultivators in the line saw this, they couldn't help but look at the red figure in the distance. They were a bit surprised. Generally speaking, cultivators couldn't be bothered with other people's business. They didn't expect the woman in red to stand up and give them a warning. However, just as the city guard had said, the red-clothed lady did not have the slightest bit of spiritual energy aura on her body. She did not look like a cultivator at all. Even so, from their point of view, they felt that the lady's immortal chi was definitely not ordinary. There was also the man beside her. He didn't look very old, but his aura was very intimidating. They reckoned that the two of them might have come from some large sect. Duan Yi, who was walking in the city, saw Fengjiu leisurely walking in front of him. He couldn't help but quicken his steps. He arrived beside her and asked, "Did you find the place you were talking about?" "There's none on this street. Let's walk a bit further." As she spoke, she turned a corner and came to a small stall that sold pastry at the corner of the street. She bought 10 of them. It smells really good." She took a deep breath and smelled the fragrance of the pastry, revealing a happy smile. "Ti Duan Yeza's sake's tt want to find a place? Let you have something to eat?" As he spoke, he glanced around and saw that there were many shops and stalls in this area. Thus, he went to the stalls selling pastries and asked, "Old man, which restaurant is the most famous in this city?" Chapter 22-26. We still have the money for food. "Elder, tell me, where should we go to the 100 Fragrances house?" Duan Yi asked with a smile. He knew that Fengjiu was picky when it came to food, especially when it came to delicious food. Since they wanted to sit down and rest here, they naturally had to go to a better place. "It's not far. Just go straight ahead and turn left for a while." The elder pointed and told them. "Thank you." Duan Yi thanked him and then said to Fengjiu, "Let's go to the 100 Fragrances house." "Okay." Fengjiu said and walked forward with him. When they turned a corner and walked for a while, she caught a glimpse of a sign on a tea house from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but smile. "Go to the 100 Fragrances house and wait for me. I'll be there in a while." Fengjiu motioned for him to go first. Duan Yi turned back and followed her gaze to a tea house. Seeing the smile on her face, he nodded and said, "Okay, then I'll order a table of dishes and wait for you. When you're done, come over." Okay. Fengjiu smiled and then walked toward the tea house. Nowadays, the people who were in charge of the forces outside the Tianyuan Palace were all carefully selected. Their main purpose was to gather information and secretly expand their forces. However, there were many people she hadn't seen before. Only Lang Hua and the others had contact with the 8 great Phoenix Guards. When they arrived at the tea house across the street, they saw that the first floor was full of people drinking tea and chatting. As soon as they entered the tea house, they heard lively chatter and laughter. Faintly, they could hear some voices on the second floor. How is it? I told you this place is good, right? Look, we can see the guests of the 100 Fragrances house sitting across from here. Look, the 2 women sitting at the table by the window on the second floor are beautiful, right? One of them is the city lord's daughter. She often comes to the 100 Fragrances house to drink tea and eat snacks. The one opposite is also very beautiful. She's wearing a blue dress. Her appearance makes people unable to take their eyes off her. There's another table. Look, do you see the guests sitting at that table? Look at their appearances. Regardless of whether they are men or women, they are all outstanding and handsome. One look and you can tell that they are not ordinary people. That's right. How can the people who can enter the 100 Fragrances house be ordinary? Those who can eat and sit there are all people of high status. Fengjiu slowly walked inside. Listening to the chaotic sounds in the tea house, she came to the counter. Shopkeeper? She looked at the middle-aged man and asked. The shopkeeper was tidying up his things. When he heard the voice, he looked up and was slightly startled. That's right. What can I do for you? Fengjiu nodded and said, It's a little noisy here. Is there a quiet place? Because of her stunning appearance and dazzling red dress, almost all the people on the first floor looked at her as soon as she entered the tea house. Yes, this way please. The shopkeeper didn't know what she wanted to do, but there was still a quiet place. Thus, he called for the waiter to take his place while he led Fengjiu to the back. It was a backyard behind the first floor. It was very quiet and there was no one else. Of course, there were 2 auras in the dark. When the 2 people who were hiding in the dark saw the person who had arrived, they looked around. When they saw the face of the woman in red, they could not help but be shocked. They quickly came out from the dark and bowed respectfully and excitedly. Chapter 22-27. Seeing the 2 people come out from the shadows and hearing their words, the shopkeeper was stunned. He looked at Fengjiu in astonishment. Master? Their master could only be the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. In other words, this stunning red-clothed woman in front of him was his master, the ghost doctor? Get up. Fengjiu sat down at the table in the courtyard and motioned for the 2 kneeling people to get up. Master. The shopkeeper hurriedly knelt down and said in fear, I didn't know it was master who came. Please forgive me for my rudeness. It's fine. She waved her hand and said, I just happened to pass by here and was about to rest here for a day. I also want you to send a message back to the Heavenly Pill House in 100 River City. The 3 people looked at each other and one of the Phoenix Guards said, Please give us your orders, master. The shopkeeper hurriedly turned and went to a room in the courtyard. He took out a brush, ink, and paper and placed it on the table. Please use it, master. Fengjiu saw this and glanced at the shopkeeper. He then wrote a few words on the paper and sealed it with a watermark. He handed it to one of the Phoenix Guards. Just send this out. Yes. The Phoenix Guard responded. He took the things and left after bowing. At this time, the shopkeeper served them tea and then stood quietly to the side. This tea house is opposite the 100 Fragrances Inn. It seems that business is good. Fengjiu took a sip of tea and asked slowly. Master, business is good. There are many people drinking tea and there are many things to talk about. The shopkeeper said. Fengjiu held the lid of the teacup and gently scraped the tea. He asked, Is there any news about the Temple of Darkness recently? I only heard that the Temple of Darkness has been reorganizing and rarely comes out. I also heard that the Temple Master of the Temple of Darkness has been cultivating in seclusion. It seems that he hasn't recovered from the injuries he suffered some time ago. Hearing this, Fengjiu's hand paused. He hasn't recovered from the injuries? Although she didn't hold back, with the strength of the Temple Master of the Temple of Darkness, he shouldn't have not recovered yet, right? Could it be that he deliberately spread the news? I heard that many people have died in this city in the past few days. Do you know who did it? She asked again. Master, this seems to be the work of a demonic cultivator. I've seen those who were killed. They all had one thing in common. The deceased were all female cultivators, and the way they died was that they had been sucked dry of their blood essence. Their corpses. The Phoenix guard beside him said respectfully. Another demonic cultivator? She frowned as she recalled the incident with the one-eyed mad demon. Yes, but this demonic cultivator's cultivation level should be very high. The city lord sent many cultivators to ambush him. Although they encountered him once, they were unable to capture him. Instead, several cultivators were killed. This matter is very troublesome in the city, and almost no one dares to interfere. The demonic cultivator of the Temple of Darkness was too powerful. The city lord of the city and the people of the various clans were guarding their own homes and didn't care much about the matters outside. Moreover, most of the people who died were female cultivators or itinerant cultivators. Therefore, under the situation where they couldn't catch the demonic cultivator, they were more worried about their own family than about the people outside. Is it happening every night? She raised her eyebrows and asked. It has already happened 5 nights in a row. Every night, 2 to 3 female cultivators die. Chapter 22-28. Yes. The shopkeeper responded happily and sent her out. However, when he reached the first floor, he saw a few men blocking his master's way. He was so scared that his face turned pale. Oh, where did this little beauty come from? Shopkeeper, is she your relative? A few men blocked in front of Fengjiu and stared at the beautiful Fengjiu with lustful eyes. In their eyes, the beauty in red did not have the slightest bit of spiritual power. She was obviously not a cultivator. She should be a rich girl. They were all cultivators, so they naturally wouldn't put a rich girl in their eyes. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to block her path. The shopkeeper carefully glanced at Fengjiu. Seeing that her expression was normal, he said, "If you want to drink tea, please go upstairs. We don't allow trouble here." These people really didn't know what was good for them. They even dared to block his master's way. They must be tired of living. What tea? Go away. One of the men pushed the shopkeeper, but he saw that the shopkeeper's footsteps were steady, and he didn't even sway a bit. Since you don't want to drink tea, please leave. The shopkeeper said calmly. For a moment, the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator filled the air. He opened a tea house here. Don't treat him as an ordinary shopkeeper. If he could become a member of the Tianyuan Palace and become a Phoenix Guard recognized by his master, how could he be qualified to be a shopkeeper without strength? In the past, when no one caused trouble, he naturally restrained his strength and acted as an inconspicuous shopkeeper. However, these people really did not know what was good for them. They dared to have ideas about his master. How annoying. When the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator came out, the men's faces turned pale. They were only in the Golden Core realm. How could they withstand the pressure of a nascent soul cultivator? Immediately, sweat appeared on their foreheads. Their faces were pale and they looked at the shopkeeper with horror in their eyes. Their legs trembled. We have eyes but did not recognize Mount Tai. We have offended you. We will leave immediately. They panicked and turned to leave. However, just as they turned around, they heard the voice of the woman in red. You want to leave just like that? Fengjiu raised his eyebrows and glanced at them. She walked forward step by step and stopped in front of the few people who had stopped in their tracks. Settle the bill. Upon hearing this, the men were startled. We've already paid the bill upstairs. I'm talking about the accounts of everyone upstairs and downstairs. The corners of her lips curled up as she stared at them coldly. Do you think you can leave after offending me? Go, calculate the accounts of the people upstairs and downstairs. Put it all on these people. As soon as she finished speaking, she glanced at the shopkeeper. Double it. Hearing this, the shopkeeper quickly replied, yes. Then, he quickly went to the counter and gave some instructions to the waiter. Then, he picked up the abacus and quickly calculated. When the men saw this, they glanced up and down and thought to themselves, even if anyone can afford to drink tea here, there are so many people upstairs and downstairs. It would cost at least a few hundred gold coins, right? If it was doubled, wouldn't it be? Thinking that they would have to fork out thousands of gold coins, their expressions changed. When they saw the shopkeeper go to the counter, they gave each other a look and quickly ran out. Chapter 22-29. Just as they were about to run out, Fengzhou's palm moved and a few silver needles shot out. Ah! A few cries of pain rang out at the same time. They only felt their legs go numb and their bodies involuntarily fell forward. Just as they were shocked, they reached out to touch their legs and touched the exposed silver needle. Seeing this, their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Their faces paled as they turned around to look. They saw that the woman in red moved a chair to the side and sat down. She held her chin with one hand and looked at them with a leisurely expression. Run. Didn't you want to run? She played with a silver needle between her fingers. The cold light of the silver needle made the hearts of the men tremble. At this time, how could they dare to think of running away? No, we won't run. We'll pay. They hurriedly said. Compared to money, their lives were naturally more important. This woman in red could make them unable to run once she made a move. Who knew if she would give them a fatal blow if they ran and angered her? Master, the bill has been settled. The shopkeeper walked over and stood respectfully beside Fengzhou. When the men outside heard the shopkeeper call the woman in red master, their faces turned pale. How could a nascent soul cultivator call her master, be an ordinary person? They must be tired of living to provoke her. Hearing this, Fengzhou stood up and walked out, saying, then settle the bill with them. Tell the guests upstairs and downstairs that today's expenses were paid by these people. Let them eat and drink to their heart's content. Yes. The shopkeeper responded. Seeing that his master had walked out and was walking towards the 100 Fragrances house, he then went forward to settle the bill with those people. On the second floor of the 100 Fragrances house, Duan Yi was sitting by the window and drinking tea. At this time, he felt a few gazes secretly sizing him up. He couldn't help but frown and look towards the gazes. Seeing that it was two women, the two of them hurriedly lowered their heads when they saw him looking at them. Thus, he withdrew his gaze and ignored the two of them. Don't you think he looks like Martial Uncle Duan? Not far away, a woman lowered her voice and asked the woman at the same table. It looks like it. However, Junior Master Duan should be in the sect. Why is he here? Could it be that we've made a mistake? The woman in the sky blue dress said softly. I don't recognize it either. I only saw it once from afar. She thought for a moment and said, why don't we go over and ask? Ask? This isn't a good idea, right? The woman in the sky blue dress was a little hesitant. There's no harm in asking. The woman stood up and walked towards Duan Ye's table. She looked at the man who was sitting there and drinking tea. The closer she got, the more familiar that baby face was. Everyone in the sect knew that Martial Uncle Duan had a baby face, but they also knew that Martial Uncle Duan didn't like people talking about his baby face. The man in front of her had a baby face. Although his aura was cold, he really looked like her sex martial uncle Duan. She took a deep breath and mustered her courage to ask, "Excuse me, are you martial uncle Duan?" Chapter 22:30. He turned around and looked at the woman. His gaze swept past her before he glanced at the woman in blue who followed behind her. He frowned but did not answer. Seeing this, the woman asked again, "May I ask if you're Duan Yi from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect, Uncle Master Duan?" The woman was afraid that he would not answer, so she quickly said, "Both of us are disciples of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. I'm Lu Xian, and she's Ruan Ru. What's the matter?" He frowned and asked with a cold expression. Hearing this, Lu Xian was delighted. Did he admit it? Was he really Uncle Master Duan? When she thought of this, an excited smile appeared on her face. "Uncle Master Duan, it's really you. I came home some time ago. I've seen you once in the sect from afar, but I'm not sure. That's why I came forward to ask." Then, without waiting for Duan Yi to speak, she said, "Uncle Master Duan, my father is the city governor here. Since Uncle Master Duan has come to Luhi City, why don't you stay at my house for a few days? Let me be the host and entertain Uncle Master Duan." "There's no need," Duan Yi said, and did not look at them anymore. "Oh. I've only left for a while. Why are two little beauties here?" A teasing voice sounded. When Duan Yi heard this voice, he turned around and a hint of warmth flashed in his eyes. "You're back." The two women heard the voice and turned around. When they saw a beautiful woman in red walking over, they could not help but be stunned. What a beautiful woman! Even as women, they could not help but be stunned when they saw her. Feng Jiu walked forward and passed by the two women. He sat down in front of Duan Yi and leaned against the windowsill as if he had no bones. He looked at the two women with a faint smile on his face. Where did these two little beauties come from? When Lu Xian and Ruan Ru saw that Uncle Master Duan knew the woman in red, they did not dare to be rude. They immediately bent their knees and bowed. "Greetings, sister. I'm Lu Xian, an inner sect disciple of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. I'm Ruan Ru, also an inner sect disciple of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect," the woman in blue said and bowed to Feng Jiu. "Oh. The Cloud Jade Immortal Sect. Doesn't that mean he's from the same sect as you?" Feng Jiu propped up his chin with one hand and smiled as he looked at Duan Yi. Duan Yi saw her teasing expression and his face couldn't help but darken. "I don't know them." When the two women heard this, they couldn't help but be startled. They wanted to say something, but they found that they couldn't say anything. That's right, he didn't know them. He was a person that they respected as martial uncle, so how could he possibly recognize inner court disciples like them? Even they had seen him once from afar. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been unable to determine whether the person before them was martial uncle Duan. Hearing this, Feng Jiu glanced at him and said coldly, "The young lady already said that she's from your sect, and you still don't recognize her? Even if we don't know each other, we're still from the same sect. Sister, martial uncle Duan really doesn't know us. We've only seen martial uncle Duan once from afar." As Lu Xian spoke, she looked at Feng Jiu and said, "Actually, it's like this. I just happened to meet martial uncle Duan, and my father is the city lord of Luhi City, so I wanted to invite martial uncle Duan to stay at my house for a few days so that we can play host to him." Chapter 22:31. "I'm not going," Duan Yi said, pouring tea and drinking it, not looking at her. Seeing this, Feng Jiu narrowed her eyes with a smile, looked at Lu Xian, and asked, "Miss Lu, if he doesn't go, I'll go. Will you invite him?" Lu Xian was startled. She glanced at Duan Yi, then looked at Feng Jiu, and quickly said, "Of course, if elder sister can come, I will definitely entertain you with great hospitality." Ruan Ru, who was next to them, listened for a long time and did not come back to her senses. She carefully glanced at the black-faced martial uncle Duan, and then looked at the smiling beautiful woman in red. She secretly guessed what the relationship between this woman in red and martial Uncle Duan was. Why did she feel so strange when the two of them got along? Didn't you say you would only stay for one night? How many days do you plan to stay here? Aren't you in a hurry to go back? Duan Yi asked angrily, feeling that Feng Jiu just liked to disagree with him. Hey, I'm not in a hurry. Didn't I ask someone to send a message back to report that I'm safe? There's nothing urgent to deal with when I go back. Since Miss Lu has invited me, I can't refuse, right? She said with a smile, completely unaware that she was the one who asked to stay in someone else's house for a while. It's fine if you don't want to go. I just asked the shopkeeper of the tea house across the street to make 2 rooms available. If you don't want to go, you can stay in the courtyard of the tea house. By the way, tell him that I'm going to stay in the city lord's house. She said with a smile. Seeing that the two of them were still standing, she motioned, don't just stand there. Sit. The two of them instinctively glanced at Duan Yi. Seeing his dark face, they didn't know whether they should sit properly or not. What are you looking at me for? She asked you to sit, so sit. Duan Yi said angrily. When the two of them heard this, they were overjoyed and smiled. Yes, thank you, Martial Uncle Duan. Thank you, elder sister. Pfft. Feng Jiu couldn't help laughing when she heard the two of them address her. She chuckled and looked at the two of them playfully, saying, you call Duan Yi Martial Uncle, but call me elder sister. Isn't this nonsense? The two of them were startled. They couldn't help but look at each other. Then how should we address each other? The two of them were also stunned. This red-clothed woman looked to be only 1 or 2 years older than them. If they didn't call her elder sister, then what should they call her? Duan Yi glanced at Feng Jiu and lowered his eyes without saying anything. In terms of seniority, she was his mentor, so her status was higher than his. However, from the 2 people from his sect, they called him Martial Uncle and her elder sister. Based on this, wouldn't Feng Jiu be his junior? You can call her the Ghost Doctor. Duan Yi said, glancing at Lu Shi and Yen Yen. Ghost Doctor? The two of them were stunned for a moment. Why was it the Ghost Doctor? Why was such a beautiful woman called the Ghost Doctor? Although he was puzzled, he didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately bent his knees and bowed, Ghost Doctor. Feng Jiu's brows raised as he glanced at Duan Yi, and then he said to the two of them, sit. Don't just stand there. Yes. The two of them sat down at this time. What surprised Feng Jiu was that the city lord's daughter, Lu Shiyan, didn't have the style of an unruly and arrogant young lady. Instead, she was much more pleasing to the eye. He originally planned to stay at the tea house for a night, but since he met the city lord's daughter, he had to stay at the city lord's mansion. Have you ordered? Why haven't you served yet? Feng Jiu looked at Duan Yi and asked. Chapter 22-32. Okay. The waiter responded, hurriedly went to the kitchen to see if the dishes were ready, and brought them all up. 8 signature dishes were served, and 2 pots of sake were also served. Feng Jiu was about to pour the wine when he saw Lu Shiyan take the wine pot. I'll pour it. As she spoke, she poured the wine for them. Thank you for your trouble. Feng Jiu said with a smile. She picked up the wine cup and took a sip of the wine. The wine was mellow, and the aftertaste was endless. She narrowed her eyes and said with a smile, this wine is good wine. Hearing this, Lu Shiyan said, Ghost Doctor, you may not know this, but this wine is unique to the 100 Fragrances house, and it is also the most famous wine in Luha City. The price of such a pot of wine is 100 gold coins per pot, and the 100 Fragrances house is only limited to selling 100 pots a day. Oh. Interesting. She played with the wine cup in her hand, gently swirling the wine in the cup. The fragrance of the wine overflowed with her swirling. This wine was thick and rich, but it was not strong. The taste was unique, and it was really something that she had never tasted anywhere else. Drinking this wine, she thought that her grandfather was addicted to wine. Now that they had returned to the Feng family's ancestral home, it would not be easy to find good wine there. If there was such good wine, if she prepared some and brought it back for him in the future, he would definitely be happy. With a thought, she asked, "Who is the owner of this 100 Fragrances house?" "This, we don't know." The two shook their heads and said. "Do you want to buy wine?" Duan Yi asked, seeing through her thoughts at once. He knew that she was addicted to wine. In the past, she would buy some good wine. Feng Jiu looked at Duan Yi and said with a smile, "Little Yi Yi, you really know what I'm thinking." "I didn't even say it, but you know what I'm thinking. You don't have to go back to the sect in the future, just stay by my side." Hearing this, Duan Yi snorted lightly and poured the wine to drink. When Lu Xian and Feng Jiu saw this, they were stunned. Little Yi Yi? Martial Uncle Duan was actually called Little Yi Yi by the ghost doctor? What was the relationship between the two of them? For a moment, the two of them looked at them curiously. They said that they seemed to be close, but they didn't feel like it because there was no ambiguous atmosphere between the two of them. Instead, they felt that the two of them were like family, and this ghost doctor was the elder type. Look at the 3 words Little Yi Yi, which normal person would be able to call her that? Especially since Master Duan was a strong fighter who had already reached the fairy realm, yet he had been called Xiao Ye just like that. This gave them a fright. Perhaps no one in the sect knew that someone dared to call Martial Uncle Duan that way. Feng Jiu and Duan Yi were eating and drinking. Lu Xian and Wanru had eaten some before, but now they only tasted a little and didn't move their chopsticks much. When they were almost done eating, Duan Yi beckoned the waiter over. "Sell me 2 jars of your sake." "Ah." The waiter was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head and said, "Young master, our wine is not for sale. You can only drink here." Hearing this, Duan Yi frowned and said, "Who's the person in charge here? Help me call him out." When the waiter saw this, he quickly left. Not long after, he invited a middle-aged man over. The waiter said to them, "This is the manager of our 100 Fragrances house." As he spoke, he left. Chapter 2233. "Don't you sell the sake here?" Duan Yi asked. The shopkeeper responded with a smile, "Yes, the wine in our restaurant can only be drunk here. It's not for sale. What if you exchange it with something else?" Feng Jiu asked, gently shaking the wine glass in her hand. The shopkeeper was slightly startled when he heard this. "This has never happened before." Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. "Shopkeeper." The waiter ran over, pulled his sleeve, and whispered a few words in his ear. Hearing the waiter's words, the shopkeeper's heart moved slightly. He couldn't help but look at the beautiful woman in red, and said with a smile, "It turns out that you are an old friend of my master. My master ordered me to send 2 jars to you." He said to the waiter, "Go to the wine cellar and get 2 jars of wine." "Yes." The waiter responded and ran away quickly. Feng Jiu raised her eyebrows when she heard this. "Old friend? Who is your master?" Why didn't she know when she knew such a person? Duan Yi glanced at Feng Jiu, thinking in her heart, needless to say, this person must be a man. Lu Xian and Wanru were slightly surprised in their hearts. They were both from this city, so they naturally knew the rule that the wine in the 100 Fragrances house was not for sale. Even if a person with a reputation in the city came, the wine would not be sold, let alone be given. It seemed that although they didn't know who this ghost doctor was, she really had some ability. Hearing Feng Jiu's words, the shopkeeper was startled and said with a smile, "How can you not know who my master is?" With that, he paused and said, "Even if you really don't know, since my master said that you are an old friend, you must be someone who knows you. You can accept this wine." Feng Jiu smiled and said, "Your master is here, right? Since she is an old friend, how can I not see her? Why don't you go and tell him that I want to meet his old friend?" Hearing this, the shopkeeper smiled and said, "All right, then please wait a moment, Mississippi." He bowed and left. In the attic on the top floor of the 100 Fragrances house, a masked man in a black robe was reclining on a soft couch. He was playing with a wine cup in his hand. He looked pensive. No one knew what he was thinking. If Feng Jiu saw his current appearance, she would definitely recognize that he was none other than the temple master of the Temple of Darkness. "Master, why did you give wine to the ghost doctor? She's clearly ruined so many of our plans. Since we know she's here, why don't we find an opportunity to make a move on her?" An old man at the side asked with a frown, his eyes full of confusion. The palace master toyed with the wine cup in his hand and did not even lift his eyelids. "Make a move on her? Heh, what's the point of that?" Hearing this, the old man was slightly startled. What did he mean by that? Wasn't the ghost doctor their enemy? He really had never seen anyone give wine to an enemy. It was one thing to give a poisoned wine, but the other party was the ghost doctor. If it could be given out, it couldn't be poisoned. He really didn't know what his master was thinking. Although he felt that his master's way of doing things was a little strange, but he was still his master and it was not good for him to question too much. Thus, he stood quietly at the side and did not speak again. He secretly thought that perhaps his master had other plans. At this time, the shopkeeper's voice came from outside. "Master, that lady in red wants to see you." Chapter 22:34. He took a sip of wine and said, "Tell her that I've left, and tell her that if there's a chance next time, I'll visit the Heavenly Pill building again." The shopkeeper outside responded, "Yes." On the second floor, the waiter was carrying 2 jars of wine and placing them on the table. He said, "Miss, please keep these 2 jars of wine." Then, he left. Feng Jiu waved his hand and put the 2 jars of wine into his space. Not long after, the shopkeeper walked over. "Miss, I'm really sorry. My master just left. He said that if there's a chance next time, he'll visit you again." Hearing this, Feng Jiu's eyes flashed. He knows about the Heavenly Pill building? Who is this person? Could it be that he went to the Heavenly Pill building to buy medicinal pills and met me? In that case, let's settle the bill, she said to the shopkeeper, indicating that he should pay for their food. "Hee, miss, my master has instructed me to treat you to this meal." Hearing this, Feng Jiu laughed. "But I don't even know who your master is, and I'm asking him to treat me. This is a bit unreasonable. Besides, he's already given me 2 jars of wine. I can't save money on this meal." At this time, Duan Yi stood up, took out a heavy money bag, and put it on the table. "This is the money for the meal." He came to Feng Jiu's side and said, "Let's go." "Okay." She nodded slightly and left with him. When Lu Xian and Duan Yi saw this, they hurriedly followed. When they came outside, Lu Xian glanced at Duan Yi and asked Feng Jiu, "Ghost doctor, why don't I show you around? There are a few places in Luha City that have good scenery." "Okay. Anyway, we have nothing to do." Feng Jiu agreed with a smile. He looked at the tea house opposite and said to them, "Wait for me." As he spoke, he walked toward the tea house and told the shopkeeper that he didn't have to vacate the room. Seeing Feng Jiu leave, Lu Xian looked at Duan Yi beside her. She thought for a moment and asked, "Martial Uncle Duan, where are you going? Did Martial Uncle Duan come out to train?" Duan Yi glanced at her and asked instead of answering, "Is it inappropriate for us to be guests at your residence like this?" No, she said hurriedly. "But why did I hear that Luha City hasn't been very peaceful recently? The various clans and the city lord's mansion are on guard. Will it really not bring you any trouble if I visit your mansion at this time?" Hearing this, Lu Xian was stunned for a moment. Martial Uncle Duan knows about this? Seeing that he was looking at her, she hurriedly said, "It's like this. Because many female cultivators have died in the past few days, my father has increased the number of guards in the city, but until now, they still haven't caught that person. Every family has their own children, so naturally, there will be martial law. However, this won't affect Martial Uncle Duan and Ghost Doctor from coming to my house as guests." I think that my father will definitely be very happy that you guys can come. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to show us around today. Fengjiu walked over and said with a smile. Sure. Lu Xian and Wan Ru responded with happy smiles. Duan Yi, on the other hand, glanced at Fengjiu. He clearly said that he didn't rest much last night and would find a place to rest well today, but now he wanted to go shopping. Could it be that he had some thoughts again? Chapter 22:35. Thinking of this, he sighed in his heart and shook his head secretly. She was really reckless. It wasn't like she didn't know that her spiritual power was sealed and she could only use Xian energy. All her contracted beasts were left in the Heavenly Pill building. If she encountered a devil cultivator who was stronger than her, what should she do? Other cultivators who had reached her level of cultivation were all otherworldly and didn't meddle in other people's business. She, on the other hand, liked to meddle in other people's business. Lu Xian and Wan Ru took the two of them to play around in the city. Lu Xian and Wan Ru didn't have Fengjiu's plan. They only thought that she had come to Luha City in the future and was quite interested in this place, so she played for most of the day. Duan Yi, who knew Fengjiu's plan, paid attention along the way to see if there was anyone special. It wasn't until afternoon that they went to the city lord's mansion. Marshal Uncle Duan, Ghost Doctor, the city lord's mansion is right in front of us, Lu Xian said as she held Wan Ru's hand and walked. Fengjiu and Duan Yi looked ahead and saw cultivators entering the city lord's mansion one after another. So, Fengjiu asked, are those people from your mansion? Lu Xian shook her head and said, no, it's because a devil cultivator appeared in this city. My father posted a notice and asked all the experts in the city to help catch that devil cultivator. These people should be here for that devil cultivator. Oh. Your father posted a notice. She looked at her curiously and asked, what's your father's cultivation level? How could he not even deal with a devil cultivator? Since he was the city lord, his cultivation level should not be low. My father is a cultivator at the middle stage of the fairy realm. However, he has a lot of things to deal with. That devil cultivator is committing crimes everywhere in the city. My father can't deal with it alone, so he asked for help from all the experts. Fengjiu nodded. The strength of a city lord was almost at the fairy realm. Many patriarchs of the clans here were stuck at this level and couldn't advance any further. They followed Lu Xian inside. Once inside, they walked for a while and saw many people standing in the courtyard talking about the devil cultivator and some of their own things. Because there were many people in the courtyard, Lu Xian said, Marshal Uncle Duan, let's go over there. There's no one on the path over there. I'll take you guys to rest first, then I'll talk to my father. The few of them were just about to walk towards the small path when suddenly, one of the middle-aged cultivators who were talking around inadvertently glanced over and saw the baby-faced Duan Yi, and his face couldn't help but overflow with pleasant surprise. Fellow Immortal Duan. Fellow Immortal Duan. That person excitedly squeezed through the crowd and ran towards Duan Yi. When he arrived in front of him, he looked him up and down and said, Aya, it really is fellow Taoist Duan. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I didn't expect it to be you. The cultivator's voice was loud and clear. As soon as his voice rang out, everyone's attention was drawn over. At this moment, all of their gazes landed on the baby-faced Duan Yi. They were puzzled in their hearts. This youth didn't look very old, so why was that cultivator at the fairy realm so excited when he saw this youth? Thus, someone who knew that cultivator asked, Fellow cultivator Hong, who is this little friend? That person looked at Duan Yi and asked. Chapter 22:36. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but gasp. This young man didn't look very old, but he was already at the peak of the fairy realm. They looked him up and down one by one, but found that his aura wasn't at the peak of the fairy realm. They couldn't help but look at Hong Xiushi in confusion. You're not mistaken, are you? This young man doesn't look very old. He has the strength of the peak of the fairy realm? How could I be mistaken? He saved me last time. Hong Xiushi said with a smile. He looked at Duan Yi and said, "Fellow immortal Duan, do you still remember me? You even saved my life last time." Duan Yi listened to them talking one by one, especially in the end. They surrounded him and asked him questions. He couldn't help but frown slightly. He looked at Fengjiu beside him, and his frown deepened. Where's Fengjiu? Where did that woman go? You really can't judge a book by its cover. I really couldn't tell that fellow immortal is already at the peak of the fairy realm. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Yes, you really deserve to be a genius of the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect, one of the 4 major immortal sects. Your future is limitless. Fellow immortal Duan is also here for the Devil Cultivator, right? Since fellow immortal Duan is from the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect and happened to pass by here, you definitely won't sit back and do nothing. Yes, the Cloud Jade Immortal Sect is one of the 4 major immortal sects, and fellow immortal Duan is so powerful. With you here, the Devil Cultivator will definitely be frightened and won't dare to come again. Listening to everyone's words, Duan Yi frowned and said, "Everyone, I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first." He turned around to leave, but he didn't see Lu Xian. He saw Wanru standing behind him, so he walked over. "Where is she?" he asked with a frown. "Uncle Duan, Xian went to invite her father," Wanru said quickly. "Don't ask her." Duan Ye's face darkened. He glanced around, but didn't see Fengjiu. Seeing Duan Ye's face darken, she couldn't help but take a step back and said in a small voice, "I don't know about the ghost doctor either." Just now, they were all squeezing over, so I also retreated to the side. When I came back to my senses, the ghost doctor's figure was already gone. Duan Yi was about to look for her when he heard Lu Xian's voice. "Father, he's Martial Uncle Duan." Duan Yi turned around and saw Lu Xian walking over with large strides with her father. When he saw this, he knew that he couldn't leave, so he looked at Wanru and said, "Are you familiar with the city lord's estate?" Seeing this, Wanru said, "Yes, I'm very close to Xian. I've been living in her house since I came back." "Then go look for her and see where she went," he instructed. "All right." She nodded in response, then turned to leave. Her heart was slightly surprised. Duan Martial Uncle really cared about the ghost doctor. Could it be that the ghost doctor was Duan Martial Uncle's relative? Until now, they still hadn't said what the ghost doctor's surname was. On the other side, Fengjiu was walking along the path, enjoying the scenery in the city lord's estate. The people there just now rushed up and pushed her away from Duan Yi. Seeing that Duan Yi was surrounded by many people talking to him, Lu Xian and Wanru were also pushed aside, so she left first. Chapter 22:37. She raised her eyebrows and turned her body slightly to look. She saw that the man had one hand under his head and the other by his side. One leg was stretched out and the other was bent slightly. His posture was leisurely and contented as he rested with half-closed eyes. That person's appearance was outstanding. Under a pair of sword-like eyebrows was a pair of half-squinted eyes. Because the other party's eyes were half-squinted, she could not see the expression in his eyes clearly. However, that tall nose, thin lips, and sharp facial features combined to form a handsome, outstanding, and masculine face that was full of masculine charm. The strangest thing was that the man's temperament, which was neither good nor evil, was strangely familiar to her. However, she was very sure that she had never seen this person before. "Why are you staring at me?" A deep and magnetic voice with a hint of sleepiness was heard. At the same time, he opened his eyes and looked at Fengjiu. When he saw her, his eyes flashed and a trace of amazement appeared in his eyes. Then, he sat up from the rockery. Fengjiu could clearly see that this was the man's first time seeing her. Because when he looked at her just now, it was clear that most people would have the same amazement when seeing her for the first time. This man did not look any different from the people she had seen before. The man sat on the rockery and stared at Fengjiu for a while. Then, with a light leap, he jumped down from the rockery and walked step by step towards Fengjiu. With a charming smile on his face, he stared straight at her and asked, "Miss, may I know your name?" That expression, that action, that gaze, and the words he said made the corners of Fengjiu's mouth twitch involuntarily. She was speechless and looked away slightly, simply unable to look straight at him. Was this man trying to seduce her? Look at that gaze, it was comparable to that of a woman in a brothel. Especially when this person was a man. That kind of strangeness definitely refreshed her understanding of him. "Miss, could it be that you're shy?" Seeing Fengjiu avert his eyes, the man chuckled and said, "Speaking of which, I should have introduced myself first. My surname is Yi, and my name is Shuran. I'm 27 years old and still unmarried. How about you?" Before he could finish speaking, he saw the beautiful woman in red turn around and leave. Seeing this, his eyes flickered slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up with an imperceptible trace of loneliness. He immediately strode after her. "Miss, I haven't finished speaking. Miss, I fell in love with Miss at first sight. I, Yi Shuran, believe that my appearance is outstanding and my bearing is extraordinary. I'm perfect for Mississippi. What does Miss think?" Fengjiu frowned at the nonsensical chatter. He stopped and glanced at the chattering person next to him, sizing him up. "Yi Shuran? That's right, it's me." He nodded with a smile, his eyes staring at her. "Which tavern did you run out of? Don't you know where this is?" When he heard this, the corner of his mouth twitched. "A small brothel?" He looked down at himself and asked, "What kind of small brothel can accommodate such a dignified and talented person like me?" "Miss, don't joke around." On the other side, Ru came over and happened to see this scene. She quickly walked over, but the moment she approached, she heard the ghost doctor's cold voice. "If you're not from a small brothel, why do you keep throwing flirtatious glances at me? Could it be that your eyes are spasming?" Chapter 22:38. Hearing this, Ru glanced at the man, then at Fengjiu. Then, she quickly stepped forward and came to Fengjiu's side. "Ghost Doctor, Marshal Uncle Duan was looking for you just now." She looked at the man, somewhat puzzled. Was this person flirting with the Ghost Doctor? If Marshal Uncle Duan found out, they would probably fight. Thinking of this, she quickly said, "I'm familiar with the city lord's mansion. Why don't I take the Ghost Doctor around? Or go to the front to find Marshal Uncle Duan? I want to take a nap. Take me to the guest room." Fengjiu said, glancing at Yi Shuran on the side, and then followed Ru to leave. Watching Fengjiu leave, Yi Shuran's expression changed slightly. His aura became a little different after she walked away. He looked playfully at the gradually fading figure. It was unknown what he thought of, but the corners of his mouth slightly hooked up, revealing a mysterious smile. After walking a distance with Fengjiu, Ru looked back and saw that the man didn't follow. She asked, "Ghost Doctor, that person didn't do anything to you, right?" "No." Fengjiu said, looking ahead and asked, "Is that person also a guest of the city lord? I didn't see him a few days ago. I think he should have just arrived today. Maybe he's also the cultivator who posted the notice." Ru said. Hearing this, Fengjiu nodded and didn't say anything more. The two walked slowly, chatting from time to time, and didn't stop until they reached the courtyard at the back. "Ghost Doctor, you live in this courtyard. Next to it is Shi Yan's courtyard. I live with her. If there's anything, you can find us." Ru said softly and took her inside. "Wait and see if there's anything missing. I'll talk to Shi Yan and have the servants send it over." Fengjiu glanced at the courtyard, then entered the room to take a look. "No need. This is already very good. She wouldn't really live here for a long time. Then you rest first." I'll go ahead and talk to Shi Yan and Marshal Uncle Duan, lest they worry. She bowed slightly, then retreated and closed the door. Seeing her leave, Fengjiu went to the bed and sat down. After taking off his boots, he lay down on the bed, pulled the quilt over him, and went to sleep. As Duan Yi said, he didn't rest much last night, and wandered around for most of the day today. As soon as he lay down, he quickly fell into a deep sleep. After chatting for a while, he stopped and didn't enter the room, led by Lu Xian and Wan Ru, came to Fengjiu's courtyard. Seeing the courtyard was quiet in the courtyard, he knew that the person in the room was Hadden had not yet awake. He knew the person in Hadden's, so he stopped Anne and Didn's for. Marshal Uncle Duan, how about I take you to the guest room to rest first? Lu Xian said, maybe the ghost doctor will wake up later. Duan Yi glanced at it and said, aren't there rooms here? Hearing this, the two of them were stunned. It was good to have an empty room here, but after all, men and women were different. Was he going to live in the same courtyard as the ghost doctor? It didn't seem good, right? What? No. Duan Yi looked at Lu Xian. No. She quickly waved her hand. Of course you can live here, but I'm worried about whether it's inconvenient. No. Chapter 2239. Duan Yi nodded and said to the two, have someone prepare a hot bath in the evening. Lu Xian was startled for a moment, and then replied, yes, I'll remember it. Then we'll go back first and not disturb Marshal Uncle Duan's rest. With that, the two bowed and turned to leave. After the two left, Duan Yi also went back to his room to rest. Wan Ru, who walked out of the courtyard, couldn't help but say, when we were in the sect, we all heard that Marshal Uncle Duan didn't get close to women and treated people indifferently. I didn't expect him to be so attentive to the ghost doctor. That's why we can't just believe in rumors. Everything has to be seen. Lu Xian said with a smile, just now, Marshal Uncle Duan said that he would help find out the devil cultivator who killed the female cultivators in the city recently. With Marshal Uncle Duan's words, I think the people in the city will soon not be so anxious. Yes. It's really a coincidence this time that Marshal Uncle Duan happened to pass by here. Otherwise, with our status in the sect, it would be difficult to ask Marshal Uncle Duan for help. The two talked as they returned to the courtyard. In the evening, they asked the servants to prepare water for a bath and send it over. When the sky gradually darkened, the two went to the courtyard to wait for them. Under the night sky, a banquet was set up in the city lord's mansion. All the cultivators were talking and laughing at the banquet, and the servants delivered food and wine one after another. At this moment, everyone stood up when the city lord arrived. City Lord Lu. Everyone smiled and cupped their hands. Hee, you don't have to be so polite. Please sit down. City Lord Lu smiled back and asked everyone to sit down. He glanced around and saw that there were still a few empty seats in front of him. He couldn't help but look at the housekeeper beside him. Xian hasn't come yet? Master, Miss went to Duan Immortal Master and should be coming soon. The housekeeper lowered his voice and said. Hearing this, the city lord nodded slightly, sat down, and said to the crowd, everyone, thank you for your righteousness. This time, I'll have to trouble you. Here, I'll propose a toast to you first. City Lord Lu is too polite. Everyone said with a smile, raised their wine glasses, and drank. At this time, they didn't see Duan Ye's figure, so they said, why hasn't fellow immortal Duan come yet? He should be here soon, right? I heard that Miss Lu went to invite him. Hee, fellow immortal Duan, you're putting on too much airs. You know there's a banquet tonight, yet you still ask Miss Lu to invite you. You're really putting on airs. The person who spoke shook his head. Sitting alone, Shuran drank his wine. He didn't pay attention to those people's words and only gently swirled the wine cup in his hand, playing with it in boredom. Father, Marshal Uncle Duan is here. Lu Xian's voice resounded, and everyone looked over as well. They saw Lu Xian and Wanru walking in the front while Duan Yi and a peerlessly beautiful woman in red walked over slowly with leisurely steps behind her. When they saw the woman in red, the cultivators were slightly surprised, and many of them were stunned. Who was this woman? Why didn't they see him during the day? She was dressed in red, and her posture carried a languid aura. Her beautiful face contrasted with her dazzling red clothes, and there was actually a touch of enchanting and charming aura. It made them somewhat unable to move their eyes away, and they only felt that their minds were slightly moved. It was incomparably stunning. However, soon, they found that something seemed to be wrong. There was no trace of spiritual power on this woman. Could it be that she was just an ordinary mortal? Come, the two of you, please take a seat. City Lord Lu smiled and invited them to take a seat. After everyone sat down, he said with a smile, everyone knows Duan, a mortal monarch, and this is the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. Ghost Dr. Fengjiu? What was that? This woman was a doctor? Thinking of this, everyone's expressions were different as they stared at the woman. Such an enchanting and beautiful woman was a doctor? What was a mere doctor doing here? Could it be that she could help with the matter of capturing demonic cultivators? Chapter 2241. How could she be an ordinary person? Didn't City Lord Lu say it? She's the ghost doctor. In that case, she should be a doctor. Ha ha ha, even a doctor is here. What are they trying to do? City Lord Lu, this girl can't be helping us catch fiendish cultivators, right? Hearing the crowd's mocking words, City Lord Lu couldn't help but frown slightly. He glanced at the ghost doctor and saw that she was pouring wine and drinking it, as if she didn't hear those cultivators' contemptuous words. Although she didn't care, she was still a guest, and his guest at that. He couldn't let these people humiliate and belittle her like this. Thus, he straightened his face and said to the crowd, everyone may not know, but the ghost doctor is definitely not an ordinary person. She. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted. Miss, so you're called Fengjiu. Then how about I call you Jiu? That Jiu made Fengjiu spit out the wine she had just drunk. Coincidentally, it sprayed all over Yi Shiran's face. Yi Shiran was dazed for a moment and felt the wine dripping down his face. He had never been treated like this before and felt his mind go blank when the wine sprayed on his face. Instinctively, he reached out to grab the corner of her clothes and wiped his face. Fengjiu's mouth twitched when she saw this scene. Seeing this person pull the corner of her clothes to wipe his face, she felt that this scene was inexplicably familiar. Once upon a time, she seemed to have done this to Xianyuan Mo's. At this moment, it was her turn to experience it for herself. This feeling really wasn't too good. Duan Yi glanced at the black-robed man and instinctively frowned. Who was this person? When did Fengjiu provoke him? If Fengjiu knew what he was thinking, he would definitely cry out that he was wronged. It was clearly Yi Shiran who stuck himself to her. City Lord Lu was also stunned when he was interrupted by this scene. He returned to his senses and whispered to his daughter sitting next to him, "What's going on?" They know each other. Thus, Lu Xian told him about Fengjiu's encounter with Yi Shiran at noon. After that, she asked again, "Father, who is this person? Do you know him? He also posted the notice today. I think his surname is Yi and he's a loose cultivator." As City Lord Lu spoke, his gaze landed on Yi Shiran. To be able to survive after daring to take liberties with the ghost doctor, this person was quite a character. After Yi Shiran finished wiping his face, he stared blankly at the red hem in his hand. Then, he narrowed his eyes and revealed an intoxicated smile. "Jiu, this smells really good. Why don't you leave this hem for me as a souvenir?" As he spoke, he moved his hand and tore Fengjiu's clothes apart. With a tearing sound, a corner of Fengjiu's clothes was torn off. Everyone who saw this scene was dumbfounded. Was this person here to cause trouble? Or are you here to beat me up? In front of so many cultivators, as well as City Lord Lu, he actually dared to take liberties with a girl, and even tore off a corner of her clothes as a souvenir? Everyone was petrified. Even though they'd lived for so long, they'd never seen such a shameless person. Duan Ye's face darkened. He stood up, circulated the spirit power in his body, and waved his hand at the black-robed man. At the same time, he coldly shouted, "You're courting death. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.